We make a whole lot of biochar in our wood stove, and in this video I wanted to share some notes on ways that I've found over the last few years that feel pretty safe and efficient in taking whole chunks of charcoal from the wood stove and crushing them down into a finer material to incorporate into our compost. So stick with me and I'll explain what we're doing there. If you're interested in more thorough details on how we're doing this charcoal production in our wood stove, that's great. I'm going to link right here and in the description. I'll explain that in much greater detail. Assuming that you're up to speed with that, or you're making charcoal in some other way that you're interested in incorporating it into your compost or into your gardens, what we find, so we compost wood, we compost bones, basically material that can be broken down that still has carbon in it. I've talked before about how incredibly beautiful this process can be. So here's this really thick, strong bone, and there's the carbon echo of it. But in these huge chunks, it's a little bit hard to incorporate it. Certainly we wouldn't just dump this on a garden. With it being biochar, it needs to be inoculated. And what I like to do is mix it into the beginning stages of our composting system. And so what I found is very simply a bag like this. Now this has been used for a year now. This, in this case, is for sunflower seeds. So I go for basically a sturdy bag from seed. What I don't use are these sorts of bags. They rip apart very easily and they start to fray. It's a lot of trash there. But maybe either you already have a bag like this for chickens or for wild birds, or know someone who does. And what I'll do, well, first I'll look through it. I find if there's nails or screws, after the charring process, it's really easy to extract them, and I'll set them aside and I'll sort through those and recycle what we can't use and reuse what we can. But once I've gone through that process, I'll take this whole container of charcoal, simply dump it in the bag, and you can hear or see that there's already some in there. Now at this point there's minimal dust, but there's a little bit. Some things I want to say here. I would never do this indoors or in any enclosed space, not in a barn. You really want to be outside with good airflow. And I would never do this with charcoal that has just come out of the wood stove or just finished the processing. When in doubt, leave it for a whole day. But really, it should be ice cold to your hands before you go to the next stage. Otherwise, you can get spontaneous combustion. So, I've got that charcoal in the bag. Here's the real hard part. I simply walk on it. Now, you can take this idea and say, well, okay, I'll commit to stomping on it and grinding it, moving it around until every last fleck is there. But I'll take one step further, and once I've got this bag loaded with a few rounds of charcoal that needs to be crushed, look at that. The beautiful teeth of a deer that fed us. Pretty amazing. And again, I'll check for old screws. That was hard to extract with a screwdriver, but now that it's charcoal form, it comes right out, and I can reuse that. I'll dump in a few containers. Now these are empty, they're ready to be refilled. I'll throw these bones and skulls, everything carbon related. Old clothing, all sorts of things. And now I can step on this and crush it. Or better yet, take some of these binder clips, fold it over so there's less dust that's coming out, and I can put this bag somewhere that I walk a bunch of times a day. Each time I walk past it, I step on it once or twice and I go about my business. If it's in that flow, then I can incorporate it into my day without spending many, many minutes with it. What I've learned is that we don't need perfectly ground fine dust charcoal to include it in our chicken composting system or other systems. I like to break it down a bit, but the chunks are fine, so I wouldn't get stressed out about that. Once this is broken down enough and it's full enough that I need space in the bag, I'll simply dust it out in a nice pile, next to a compost bin so that it can be scooped and incorporated into the compost as we need cover material, or dump it on our chicken composting operation at the beginning of the process so it can absorb the most nutrient as it moves through the system. I don't like to put it in the coop. I feel like the dust is probably not great for their lungs. I think the dust of this when it's dry is not great for our lungs. So outdoors or with a mask, whatever you need to do if you feel sensitive about it. But this is a really simple system. It works super well for us, and it lets us crush charcoal without much fuss.